Hi guys, welcome back to the Earthy Delights podcast. Our guest today is Christina Akintoye, a friend of mine from boarding school. We've known each other for over a decade now. I talked to Christina about the recent SARS crisis in Nigeria, and we questioned whether certain negative connotations about African countries and subsequently African immigrants lead to delayed support. Do Black lives only matter when they come from America or the UK, or do we care equally about African Black lives too? We cover all this and more, so buckle in, folks. You're in for a ride. Without further ado, here is Christina Akintoye. Christina, welcome to the Earthy Delights podcast. What's the crack?
What's the crack? I'm doing good, thank you. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. It's so nice to appear on someone else's podcast rather than my own. So thank you. I really appreciate you guys for having me.
Not at all. Absolute pleasure. For those of you who don't know, you've kind of already mentioned slightly, but what is it that you do? Obviously, I'm guessing you have a podcast, but what else is it that you do?
Yeah. So apart from my podcast actually is called Growing and Flourishing. It's on every major podcast platform. It's about personal development and just growing as a human being and just enjoying the journey of life. I think people have these goals and, they're so focused on the goals that they don't actually focus on the journey, which is the most valuable part of it all. So that's what the podcast is all about. And then I am also an entrepreneur. So I have a skincare business for people with eczema specifically. I'm really passionate about that due to a personal story of mine. And then I also work in the field of global communications. So I recently moved to Nigeria, which I know we will talk about, to work with the United Nations in the field of global communications. And it was really great. It was during the whole COVID crisis and I was able to kind of like help out with that. So yeah, I really enjoyed it.
We've known each other for over a decade now, and we went to the same school, boarding school together in Skegness. But obviously, you're from London. But why is it that you've taken the plunge to actually leave London and go back to Nigeria?
So I wasn't necessarily forced out of London. Like Seb said, I was born and raised in London. London's all I ever knew, and London was what I thought my future would be, at least for the next 5 to 10 years. I always had a desire to move to Nigeria, but I didn't think it would be so soon. And situations just arose where I was given the opportunity. So what happened after university was that I did my master's for a year. And during my master's, I was able to start my business and be incubated. And an incubator is just like an organization which helps you grow your business. And I also went on an accelerator course and I was given like up to 15,000 grand of funding, 15,000 pounds, of funding. And it was really amazing. And, I thought that was my future. And I was devoted to my business and I was ready to start my business, but I also wanted to gain some experience in the work world. And I ended up working in a public relations firm. It was really great exposure. We did a lot of public affairs and stuff like that. But I realised that I didn't like the British culture in terms of the British corporate culture and how offices are. And I found myself feeling really low and maybe even anxious and depressed because one, I was the only Black person in the office, and two, I was the only Black woman in the office. And people that are Black will understand there's a difference between being Black and being a Black woman. It's what they call intersectionality. It means that you have two sort of, I don't want to say disadvantages, but you have two minorities within you that you have to deal with. Not only are you a woman in a male-dominated industry, in public affairs, we deal with politics a lot, and public relations, we deal with advertising, marketing. You do see a lot of men in that industry, and then you hardly ever see people that are Black. I had no one to look up to that was Black, and so I found it very difficult. And I did mention it a few times to HR, but I think maybe they didn't think it was a big of enough issue. And I noticed that I was going down a downward spiral. And then something happened, which I see as a blessing in disguise, but it ended up that I didn't pass my probation and my job said, we're going to let you go. And I would just remember crying, but the crying was like tears of joy, because when I went into that meeting, I had in one hand a resignation letter, but because of the nature of who I am, Seb will know this, I don't like letting people down and I don't like upsetting people. And so I was too scared to give my resignation letter in for about 2 months. I just carried on in that job, even though I was so unhappy. And so when they let me go, I was happy on the inside, because I saw it as a sign that, okay, well, right now I don't have a job. And by the way, my parents moved to Nigeria whilst I was in boarding school with Seb about 10 years ago. So at least I have that foundation there. I can go and stay with mum and dad for like 6 months, rethink about my life, recalibrate, and then come back to the UK when I feel better. But that was never the case because of COVID. And I've ended up staying here. And it's been a blessing in disguise, because I just decided, let me just apply for this job at the UN with someone that studied international relations and politics. I've been applying to UN jobs before university since like 2013. And, UN jobs are so difficult to get. So I was so surprised that I even got an interview. And they called me whilst I was in the UK that I'd got an interview, that when I come to Nigeria, I'm allowed to have a face-to-face interview. I was gobsmacked and just saw it as destiny. And Seb knows I'm a very spiritual person, and I do believe that everything happens for a reason. God makes everything happen for a reason. And the UN job that I was supposed to be doing from December to April, because I was supposed to come back to the UK in April, actually decided to extend my job to June. And it was just such a blessing in disguise, because I couldn't travel in April anyways. And I was able to help Nigeria through the whole COVID crisis. So whenever stuff like this happens, I always tell people, like, go with the flow. Like, these things happen for a reason. And I'm just so happy that I moved to Nigeria. So yeah.
It's great to hear, but it leads us on to, I guess, one of the main topics of the podcast, which is, unfortunately, the whole SARS debacle that happened in Nigeria. And before I get on to any questions, could you just do, this is a hard question, but could you summarize for anyone who maybe doesn't know the whole SARS situation, for someone who maybe hasn't read about it or heard about it?
Yeah, so SARS stands for the Special, what's it stand for again? Special Anti-Robbery Squad. And they're a institution just under the police. So I like to say to people, just as you have the Metropolitan Police in the UK, and then under that you have those police that ride around on bikes in community areas, they're kind of like, they have a specific role, and those community officers don't enforce law, but they just check if things are okay in communities. So this special anti-robbery squad in Nigeria, obviously by the name you can tell that their duty is to make sure that they keep tabs on robbers, armed robbery and stuff like that. So that is their role. And that was created in the 90s because Nigeria was going through a lot economy-wise, and so there were increased number of armed robberies, and so not just robberies, armed robberies, and people were being killed on the daily. So they decided to make that squad to keep that under control. And someone rightfully said that sometimes when you give the police too much power, they end up turning into the people that they're supposed to be protecting us from. So a lot of people experienced unjust convictions, brutality, killings, rape, and people had just had enough. And I think something happened online where somebody spoke out about it. And then all of a sudden, within less than a week, there were protests all over the country. And, and even in places like the UK, London. And it was great to see the support and everything. But I'm sure I'll get onto that a bit later. I think the support was kind of delayed. So anyways, the protests were occurring. And if you look at the history of Nigeria, you'll see that from its independence, so this year Nigeria turned 60. From its independence in 1960, there has been interchanging governments. So at one point, the government was civilian rule. At another point, the government is military rule. So there was a lot of political instability for about 50 years. I would say this is the most peaceful time Nigeria's had in the past 10 years, 10, 20 years, from about 1990 something. And so Nigeria's always had a government that people have complained about, should I say. And the SARS protest turned into not just a protest against police brutality, but a protest against the things that the government does, like corruption and things like that. So many things came out in the open, so many secrets came out in the open during this time. And so I think right now, our president is a former military ruler that ruled the country in like late 70s, 80s. I can't remember exactly what year. His name is President Muhammadu Buhari. And he is known for his strictness. During his time, people weren't even allowed to litter. They would be beaten up by police if they littered. Like his mindset was like, if we instill terror into the people, then they will obey us. And so, on the 20th of October, 2020 was a day that I think a lot of people would never forget in Nigerian history. So there were protesters, peaceful protesters. I just want to add that so people know that, Nigerian youth, it was the Nigerian youth that have been protesting peacefully for about 2 weeks and protesting online prior to that. And they were sitting down in a very well-known and I would say the hub of protests nationwide, in a place called Lekki in Lagos Island. They were sitting down on the floor, waving Nigerian flags, singing the Nigerian anthem, being very patriotic. And all of a sudden the lights switched off. And people know this because not only were there reports, but, some people were on Instagram Live. So there's proof that this happened, despite what some politicians might be saying or might have said. And so they were peacefully singing the Nigerian national anthem, and then lights were switched off. Street lights were switched off in the area, and they couldn't see anything. And all of a sudden, gunshots happened, and people were so confused. And unfortunately, because people couldn't see to run for cover, they kind of, lots of people were wounded, some people were killed. And now it's known as, the Lekki massacre, because a lot of people feel like what the government did, or whoever sent the soldiers, especially because they know that they were wearing army clothes, so they know it was army officers. And, whoever sent the soldiers kind of tried to instill fear into the youth, trying to make them feel like their voices will never be heard, because some people think Nigeria is a dictatorship. Some people don't know. I mean, nobody really knows who sent what, whether it was the executive government, meaning that the presidency and his office, or whether it was the Lagos governor. And some people have beliefs that it was godfathers in politics. These are people with lots of influence, lots of money, lots of power, because people like that do have soldiers on hand. It it was a terrible time for many people, especially me, because just 4 days before that, I was on that same soil. Like, I was there handing out food to protesters, just encouraging people to keep lifting up their voices so our voices can be heard, so police brutality can stop, and so corruption can stop. So yeah, that's it in a nutshell. Lots to it, but yeah.
No, you've done like really well to kind of encapsulate that and get, like you said, give it to us in a nutshell. I saw the image. I saw a few images, unfortunately, on Twitter of some of the shootings and uh, some of the corpses. Is now I was trying to find a nicer word, but there really isn't a nicer word. It is what it is, and yeah, it was distressing. But I think for me, and the reason why I wanted to have this podcast with you, is because I have a slight. I don't know how to put this. My worry is that Africa's problems are Africa's problems, not humanity's problems. As the title of this podcast is, Africa's problems are they humanity's problems? I think that they are, obviously, and I say obviously, but in reality, maybe it isn't so obvious, because that's what I found most distressing was actually there wasn't that much support worldwide, at least from the feeds that I was looking at. And when we compare it to BLM, for example, which obviously was a worldwide thing, but it kind of was born in America, that garnered loads of support from celebrities, from people all around the world, white, black, gay, straight, didn't matter. You supported that movement. And I wondered how much of that was performative. I wondered whether people were really serious about that allyship, about being in support of such a movement. And I think, I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I think kind of what happened in Nigeria, and look, there's been problems in many other countries in Africa recently that haven't got the headlines that they deserve and the time on the news that they deserve. And I think it is kind of indicative of that performative nature that we saw in the BLM movement. And I wonder, for you as a British Nigerian, so obviously you can kind of see both sides of the coin here. How does that tally with yourself? I know you've spoken to me about the diaspora Nigerians and maybe and you said how maybe the support and the demonstrations came up slightly later than maybe you would have hoped. But even, I'm not just talking about diaspora Nigerians, but just talking generally, how does that tally with you, that you feel like kind of Africa is always forgotten? Or because the way I saw it, or the way that I kind of interpreted what was happening, was that when something bad happens in Africa, it's kind of like, oh, typical Africa. Do you know what I mean? It's never really moved on. Like this shit is just a daily thing for Africa. Whereas, for example, when we saw the shootings in Paris, all of a sudden that really shocked everybody, and rightly so. But you would see everybody put the France filter on their profile pictures, this, that, and the other, pray for France, and yada, yada, yada. And I was like, maybe that's because we see ourselves closer to the French in the terms of like society and culturally. And so it almost impacts on us more. I was talking to Jim, and Jim said he thinks there's definitely a part of racism is involved, but maybe just a part as well that people can't actually, there's only so much people can care about, right? And that maybe if you're not Nigerian, or you don't have Nigerian friends, or whatever the case may be, maybe that it just doesn't enter your mind, like it doesn't enter your kind of your environment, and so therefore you don't really give it that much credence. My argument to that would be, well, I agree with Jim, to be honest. I do agree with him, but I think then those same people shouldn't have been giving it big energy throughout the BLM movement, because if you're not serious about it, I feel like if you tweeted BLM and all the rest of it and all the support, then you have to be there in support of all what Black Lives Matter. Is it only Black Lives American, or is it Black Lives African, Black Lives as well? Do they matter as well? Do they matter equally as much to us? And I really hate to say this, but I'm not sure that is the case. What do you think?
Wow, I think you've hit the nail on the head, and it's so nice to like kind of, it's so refreshing to kind of hear from someone who isn't in my position physically. You're not Black, and also physically like you're not in Africa, because when the whole Black Lives Matter movement, obviously Black Lives Matter is not a new movement. It's just something that was amplified through the whole George Floyd killings. So, you know, Black Lives Matter has been around for a very long time. And so when it was amplified, obviously I was happy because change was able to occur. And during that time, so many things happened. You heard of people in their offices and employers talking to them about certain things and actually considering them and becoming more aware of the Black experience, because being Black is an experience. It's always been an experience since the time of colonization. And I will always say that and believe that. And I love how you questioned with this whole Black Lives Matter thing, is it a sense of Black Lives Matter only because only in the UK or only in America and not in Africa? And is there a sense that we only have so many things that we can care about? I understand how people may feel that way because our minds are full of so much that if we take on so much, it can almost overwhelm you, almost make you feel down and depressed yourself. You know, you care about animal rights, you care about the environment, you care about FGM, you care about things like human trafficking, you care about gender equality. Like, it can be a lot. And I understand because naturally I'm that person because of my interests. But I think you can never care too much. It's that people have a wrong sense of understanding what it means to care, in the sense that you can care about something, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be doing the things that everyone does. In a sense that when Black Lives Matter was happening, people were posting, you know, but some people didn't post. Some people actually dealt with it in the office or dealt with it in the space that they knew how to deal with it within their close friends. That's caring, you know? So it can almost feel overwhelming when you only do things to show that you care, but it doesn't come natural to you. And that's why I think some people think like, oh, something has happened now. I have to show that I care by posting it online. You know, people are suffering in Congo, people are suffering in South Africa, people are, you know, and there's almost that pressure to retweet, or that's almost that pressure to post something on your page. But I don't think that posting necessarily fixes the matter. It can work towards fixing it in the sense that it raises awareness, but it doesn't fix it in the sense that what is the matter? Let's hit the nail on the head and actually get something done. And so when it came to the whole end SARS thing, the reason I feel that people's responses were delayed was because I was so surprised, and not to condemn anyone that's Nigerian that's listened to this, that's in the diaspora. And when me and Seb say the diaspora, we mean that people that are originally from Nigeria and maybe born in another country, like someone like me. I'm a Nigerian diasporian because my dad was born in Nigeria, my mom was born in the UK, but she's Nigerian, my dad's Nigerian too, you know? I was a bit disappointed in the diaspora in the sense that I felt like responses were very delayed, in the sense that many people were seeing these things online and they were going on with life as normal. But if you compare it to what happened with Black Lives Matter, people spoke up straight away. And it made me question, but some of you come to Nigeria for Christmas. You come because you love to enjoy yourself. You just posted last week or 2 weeks ago that it was Independence Day. Nigerian Independence Day is on the 1st of October. Yet you find it difficult to try and speak up about what's going on in Nigeria, or even ask questions. You know, I posted something on my page that and on my Twitter, my Instagram page and on my Twitter, to help people understand how they could help, in the sense that you don't just need to post. Why don't you reach out to people you know that live in Nigeria? Ask them if they're mentally and physically okay, if they need any help, if they need to email their bosses or something because they feel too overwhelmed to come into work. If there's a way you can donate to help any of the causes or anybody that may have not been able to go into work because a lot of roads were closed and therefore don't have money. There's so many different ways to help. And I think you're right in the sense that Africa kind of gets forgotten. Africa has a narrative that is not true to Africa. And I know that for sure because I know that when people come to Africa, when people come to countries, and I don't know why people think Africa is a country, by the way, it's a continent. We're about 50 something countries. When people come to Africa, the continent, they're surprised at the wealth, they're surprised at the experience, they're surprised at the love and the hospitality, because that's what Africans are about. But I really want to challenge anyone listening to this that if Africa wasn't a wealthy continent, why would have people come and colonized Africans in the first place? They obviously saw value here, you know, and it's nothing for people that are in former colonial master countries like, you know, the UK and France to feel guilty about, because obviously you were never there. But it's for people to understand that a lot of African identity and a lot of what people think about Africa is embedded in people's former colonial mindset, in the sense that, oh, we need to go to Africa because they have resources, they need our help. You know, they're seeing Africa as a place to give aid to, Africa as a place to kind of help because we're behind or we're developing. And so I think that when bad things happen to Africa, like you said, Seb, or happen within African countries, like within African nations, people are like, well, here we go, it's Africa again. Is it not Congo that's dealing with political instability and issues? Is it not South Africa that is dealing with a lot of increased cases of rape and sexual assault and gender-based violence? And I don't think people should have that mindset, because if something like that were to happen somewhere like the UK or France or America, we would not think, oh, it's just the UK. So we need to see nations equally. We need to see nations with equal eyes and see nations on an equal playing field. And just the same way you would care about something happening in France, just as you mentioned, Seb, we should care about things happening in every nation, whether we know someone there or not. But caring doesn't necessarily mean that you have to post something. So that's my take on that.
Yeah, it's ending on that, caring is not necessarily posting. I think for our generation, that's almost an oxymoron, you know, whereby people feel as if they have to tweet. And I know that during like the Black Lives Matter, for example, I know that people felt pressure to, and because if they didn't tweet, they would get called out in their groups. And, oh, are you racist? Why aren't you posting this, that, and the other? Blah, blah, blah. But like you said, a post can do so much. It might raise awareness, but if you're not willing to act upon that post, if it only ever is a retweet, then it loses any potency or any potential potency that it may have. And like that was the big thing that I was worried about, to be honest, because I've been, and I don't want to come across as I'm some sort of like messiah or some sort of white savior or anything like that, but I'm very lucky that I went to boarding school and I grew up with you guys. There's about 20 like British-Nigerians all there, some directly from Nigeria and some like yourself or Michael, who had grown up in London but obviously had very strong roots back in Nigeria. And that allowed me to grow up with an appreciation for a country and a continent and a culture that I would have never have had exposure to had I not gone to that school, basically, had I not gone to boarding school. And so I have an affinity with that culture, right? Because I've seen you guys and I've lived with you guys and I've visited your homes and I've eaten jollof rice and I've had pounded yam and all of that stuff, and it's beautiful. And so then I have this affinity with it, and I understand how maybe maybe someone who doesn't know a Michael or a Christina, they might not have that. But then my kind of challenge to those people would be, you know, like you said, let's not make it performative. If you really care about something, that's great. But like you said, ask, reach out. I'm sure you know someone who knows someone who's Nigerian, or whatever the case may be. A simple retweet, a simple hashtag, it really doesn't do anything. And I think we do it for our own image. I think we do it because we want to look good. We want to look righteous. We want to look virtuous. And ultimately, it's a downward spiral because you're going to get caught out, right? Because if you keep on doing these retweets, people are going to ask you questions. And then when you start talking and you don't know, then it's going to be like, oh, okay, I see what this is. This is just a charade. This is just a fugazi that you're putting on, but it's not real. And I think that's a real big problem. And I think people we're too self-involved, right? And we think about our own problems, like you said, but we can't, I agree with you. You can't care too much. And so if you care enough, what is it to have a conversation? What, just to sit down, like me and you are doing now, just to sit down for an hour, call someone, whatever it may be. That's not, and to me, that does miles more good, let's be fair, than a retweet, because most of these people who retweet, and they're not influencers, they have 200 followers, okay? So like this whole raising awareness stuff, there's a cap on it, do you know what I mean? But if you reach out to someone and you really converse with them and you show that you care, that's something that's long lasting. I mean, I reached out to Michael, and like he's diaspora, he lives in London, but I knew that it'd be taxing for him because like he has family in Nigeria, and because he's a proud Nigerian, and like to see something like that going on in your own country, I can only imagine, you know, if something like that was to happen in Italy, for example, even though I'm not in Italy, it would still hurt the soul, you know? And so I reached out to him and just said like, oh bro, how you doing? Like, I hope you and your mom, like Auntie Gloria, are all fine, this, that, and the other. And he took a couple of days to reply, and that was absolutely fine. But when he replied, he said, look, I really appreciate you reaching out to me. And I think that's caring, right? Or that's at least trying to care and being sincere with it. And yeah, it's a real problem. Do you think that because of how we see, and when I say we, I mean the British public, right? How we see Africa as these poor, underdeveloped, you know, these poor little things. We always have pity on Africans, be it Nigerian, be it wherever. Do you think that then kind of somehow subconsciously almost seeps through into the British Nigerians, into the British South Africans, and so on and so forth, to a point whereby they don't want to openly talk about the African heritage because it's almost sullied, it's almost dirty, do you know what I mean? Whereas, for example, if I go into a restaurant, or if I go into a public place and talk about Italy, anyone and everyone in that place wants to talk to me about Italy and tell me about their Italian experiences, and they had this pizza here and they had this pasta here and they went to Rome once and blah blah blah. But you don't see that same energy with Africa, right? And African heritage. Do you think that was maybe the reason why there was a delayed reaction in terms of the protest that we did see in London?
I think what's fantastic is recently the Black Lives Matter has been making people more proud of their African heritage. So you see girls like me that are okay with going into work with braids. Like I remember when I was in my old job and I got braids done. This was like maybe about 4 or 5 months in to work in my job, just before I left. And I was so scared to go to work on Monday because I didn't know how people would react. I've heard of horrible cases where people have worked for certain companies and they've been sent home because their hair is seen as unprofessional, you know, and really that's our culture. And I think people are embracing African culture more, but you're so right, only because it's something I've studied. So I don't know if I spoke to you about this, Seb, but for my undergraduate dissertation, I wrote a dissertation about post-colonialism, which is a ideology. You know, you have people that have certain mindsets in the sense that they may be a sort of conservative, so conservatism, or they're liberalist, so liberalism. You have post-colonialism, which those people have the mindset that colonization affected the Black experience, whether you whether you live in America, the Caribbean, or Africa, or all around the world, if you do have black skin, you tend to be of black heritage or ancestry, in the sense that, you know, most black people that live in the Caribbean have the ancestry of African blood because of the slave trade, and the same with America. So those post-colonialists have the mindset that, you know, colonization affected black people. And I found it interesting, so I decided to write a dissertation on it. But what I found when writing the dissertation was that a lot of the people that wrote about it, that we have access to in the UK, in libraries, they're all white. And if I wanted to find people that had written about it, that were Africans themselves, that had been a part of the slave trade, or had experienced, you know, how colonization affected their lives, I couldn't find it in the library, people that are of African origin. And so I do believe that the African narrative has been downplayed and has been made people to feel pity on Africa, like you said, to make people feel like, oh, these poor Africans, you know. And you see things on TV like Water Aid, Oxfam, and if you've never interacted with someone from Nigeria or from Africa, and they say, you know, if you donate £2 a month, you can give a well to a Nigerian village, you think Nigeria's like that, until, you know, you have Nigerian friends, and you'll see that many people do not have that experience, although many do, because there's high poverty rates in Nigeria. Apparently Nigeria is the capital of poverty in Africa, but it's also what they call the giant of Africa, with the biggest economy, and in population. You know, people might have that mindset of black people or Nigerians. And you're right in the sense that it could have crept in to even people within the diaspora. I remember when I was growing up, I moved from North London, Camden, where if you look at my nursery pictures and my older brother's nursery pictures, we literally go from, because I moved when I was in reception, he was in year 2. So our class photos in Camden were literally like, say there's 30 people in the class, 10 are black, 10 are Asian, Indians, Chinese, or maybe 15 are like, you know, Asian, and then you've got 5 that are white, or 10 that are white. You know, it was very diverse. And then we moved to Kent, a place called Dartford, and we were the only black family in this little village within Dartford. And, you know, it was very hard I remember my older brother, because he's got that consciousness. He was about 7, but I was only 5. So then, you know, racism doesn't really creep in at such a young age. But I remember end of primary school, there was maybe 1 or 2 other black people in my school. It was cooler then to be like from the Caribbean. You know, the Caribbean is seen as exotic. You have your jerk chicken, you have your rice and peas. Like everyone, you know, wants to go to Jamaica on a holiday or Barbados on a holiday. And so if someone assumes you're Jamaican, you just kind of, it sounds bad, but you kind of keep quiet about not being from the Caribbean. And if you're seen as African, some people used to unfortunately make fun of you. I was lucky to be surrounded by other Nigerian people, especially in my secondary school before I came to boarding school. And so it made me proud of my heritage. And my parents have always instilled that within me and my brothers, that we should be proud that we're from Nigeria, in a sense that, you know, I think a lot of people's parents, when they moved, because their parents are first generation immigrants, when they moved from Nigeria to the UK, they were just taught in the UK way. But I remember my parents basically saying that when you're outside, when you step out of the front door, you're in the UK, but as soon as you step into the front door, you're in Nigeria. And, you know, they taught us Nigerian customs. And, you know, I don't know if you've ever seen the Nigerian broom that we used to sweep. It's like this wooden thing, even down to like our household things were Nigerian. We ate Nigerian food and we went to Nigeria in the summer. And it sounds very similar to your Italian experience. Because I remember you telling me about how you'd go and stay with like your grandma in Italy and that's how you learned Italian. But if you had never gone, which some Nigerians weren't as fortunate as my family to not go to Nigeria, you're kind of brought up in this British way. And I find that people that haven't necessarily been to Nigeria or connected with their Nigerian roots do have that mindset that the British do, which is kind of pity on Africa, unfortunately. So, yeah.
It's funny because when I shouldn't say funny, it's interesting because when I grew up, obviously with you guys, I was 11, I was year 7, Michael and yourself were a year above me, and then your brother Akin came in. I think he came in sixth form level, and then we'd have people join younger as well. And what was funny, I should stop saying funny, what was interesting to me that I look back on it now in hindsight was the difference in the way you guys had to interact in a school environment. And I remember, for example, so you would have your clique, especially in boarding school, and I was lucky. I've written a piece of the Oyinbo experience, but like I kind of like brought in to the group, thank God. But so there's this like hub of just Nigerian culture in Wainfleet, Lincolnshire, which was pretty crazy to see. But what I remember is that like at school and stuff, both be it from pressure from your parents and also kind of systemic pressures, you had to achieve excellence. I always remember that none of you guys, whether you did or not, that's another question, but none of you guys were allowed to even like entertain the notion of failure, which I always thought was interesting because as a white guy or white girl, you have a lot more freedom in that sense and you can explore more things. And our friend Michael, I always remember him telling me that, like, Seb, the thing is in Nigeria, like there's four jobs. There's being a lawyer, there's being an engineer, there's being a doctor, and there's being unemployed. And anything, so basically what he was saying is like, these are my 3 options, and like anything outside of those options, I'll be seen as a failure in terms of like by my family. Now look at him doing graphic design, and I know he had to fight with his mum to some extent to get her to accept that he wanted to go down this route. And I wonder, like, how do you balance those pressures, both coming from family and like the kind of the system? Do you know what I'm trying to say? And also, sorry, like a double part question to that: do those pressures decrease somewhat when you actually go back to Nigeria, because now you're not competing with white people anymore? So now you're in Nigeria and you're all just Nigerian. Do you have more freedoms now to express yourself how you want to? Could Michael have grown up and told his mum from the get-go that he wanted to be a graphic designer instead of studying science at university, for example, if he had gone back to Nigeria?
Actually, so starting with your second question, it is a pressure within Nigeria as well. So, I think things are slowly changing because people are realizing there's industries that you can really thrive in and become an entrepreneur. Like, for example, the fintech industry in Nigeria is really growing, and people are saying, in the next 10 years, it could be the next Silicon Valley, because people are getting into fintech, people are getting into like making apps and stuff like that. And then also the entertainment industry. I guarantee you, if you don't know Nigerian, you know a Nigerian song. You know Wizkid, you know Davido, you know all the Nigerian songs, the band at least, like, and so the entertainment industry is booming. You see that on Netflix just as much as Bollywood films are Nollywood films, Nigerian films, and so the entertainment industry is really booming, and people are starting to have their eyes open to the fact that being a lawyer, being a doctor, being an engineer are not the only 3 routes of employment. And I think in my parents' time, their parents used to tell them that. So you see a lot of people around my grandparents' age that are in the medical field or are in the law field or an engineer, and they did succumb, and then our parents' generation, some of them succumbed to the pressure. I remember my dad, he's very playful, and he was known as someone that is really smart, but he used to play around a lot, and he was kind of what you would call like a B-knock on campus, or a class clown, but he
Like
ended up
Akin.
studying engineering, but really. Yeah, like Akin, basically like my brother. They're quite similar. But he ended up studying engineering, and to be honest, my dad he's practiced a bit of engineering, but he's a businessman. Like, if he just studied business from the get-go, I mean, it wouldn't have changed much because it comes naturally to him. He's a businessman, and it's great he has the engineering background because of what he does in business. But he's a businessman, and I feel like if there wasn't that pressure, maybe he would have taken a different route. And my mum, I remember her saying that she was so upset because she didn't get into uni for law, so she had to apply to the next similar thing, which was English. And so, but right now she's doing so well, and her English degree has opened doors for her. So I think, although my parents wanted all of us to study law, luckily my youngest brother studies law. So after trying with my oldest brother, he not wanting to study law, me saying that I want to study international relations and politics, and my dad going, "Oh, that's similar to international law." Eventually, my younger brother now studies law, so my dad's like at peace. But my mom has always been the type of parent that has said, whatever you want to do it, but do it well. And that goes on to your first questions. Nigerians do have pressure to be exceptional in everything they do, possibly because of the population. We have such a large population that if you're not exceptional, you cannot stand out. I think a similar case is in China. If you bring a Chinese person to the UK, a 5-year-old will be doing, 15-year-old maths. That's why when they come to the UK, they're exceptional. And they do so well in those sorts of subjects because there's that pressure to be exceptional from a young age. And that's the case. But actually, stemming from that question, I think a lot of pressure came from the fact that, one, we're Nigerians, and some of our parents had sent us to the UK. So obviously with me and my brother, we were already in the UK in boarding school. But some parents had actually sent their children to the UK and were paying boarding house fees in Naira. And if you know the Naira to the pound, the pound is very strong. So there was that pressure to not waste your parents' money. If you wasted your parents' money, you are in trouble. And being in trouble Nigerian way is different to being in trouble UK way. Let me not say this because I obviously don't want people to think like social services to come and get people, but Nigerians do not shy away from beating their children. They do believe in it. And disciplining their children. I shouldn't really say beating, disciplining their children. I was blessed enough to have a dad that doesn't beat. He doesn't believe in it, but he believes in discipline, and that's even more scarier sometimes. Sometimes you just want to take the beat and go, but my dad would discipline you. And so there was that pressure to do well, but then also going back to the whole Black experience in the UK, if you're Black, there is a pressure to be exceptional because you want to be noticed, you want to be chosen, and not be overlooked. One, because of your ethnic minority. And I'm not just talking about Black people, I'm talking about Asians, I'm talking about any ethnic minority. And you want to stand out. And I think there's that extra pressure to prove a point, especially if you're someone like a Black man. I remember my younger brother coming home one day when I was in the UK, and I think he was like in his first year of uni. And, Afro hair, and you cut it really short, because I remember I had a low cut once. I cut all my hair off. It gets really cold. Like, obviously, if you have short hair, your hair gets cold. But with African hair, with Afro hair, it gets really cold. And he put his hood up in the night, and he was walking home, And all of a sudden he said that one woman just kind of jumped and held her bag and kind of like ran away from her. And that's the perception of black men from a lot of people. Like if you were in a lift with a black man by yourself at night with a hood on, ask yourself, would you be scared? And so that makes you think about how much black people, and especially black men, need to prove to society that, yeah, they've gone to uni. Because if that woman had a 1-minute conversation, she would have learned that my brother is the gentlest, kindest, someone that won't even kill a spider, someone that's studying law, who's very smart, educated, and intelligent. And she wouldn't have had that mindset. So to him, there's that extra pressure to prove something to not just society, not just your parents, but to society, that as a black individual, I'm educated, I want good for myself, I'm not going to harm you. And I know not everybody has that mindset, but a lot of the population that have never interacted with black people do. And so that's something that constantly needs work. But that kind of is one of the places the pressure comes from, trying to prove to society. And I think also, I never experienced this growing up in London. Like I said, London is quite multicultural and everything. But when I moved to our boarding school in Skegness, I cannot forget what happened on like the first week. I remember my form tutor, she said something along the lines of, Christina, over the past 2 weeks, I've noticed how amazing your English is. I was like, oh, thank you. I said, what do you mean? And she was like, it's not your first language, is it? And I was like, yes, it is. I don't even speak Yoruba, my native Nigerian language. I was born and raised in the UK, in London. Like, this is my accent, this is my language. If anything, Nigerians see me as foreign when I come here, So I just got taken back by, wow, okay, so she even feels like English is not my first language. And she thinks I'm making an effort to try and prove that I can catch up with everyone. And that's the sort of pressure that black people get every day, not in the sense that people don't think that they can speak their language, but people think that they naturally fall short because they're not like hereditarily English or white. They naturally fall short in the space of certain areas. So I think there is that pressure, and that's why you do see a lot of exceptional people that are black or of ethnic minority trying to prove a point, because they really need to, kind of prove a point, and also make their parents proud. Because I know that my friend is Pakistani, and she always talks about how her parents, have always been like, we didn't move to this country for you to be, so you always have that in the back of your mind as well, that your parents were immigrants, went through a lot of stress to bring you here, because she moved here when she was 11, or they went through a lot of stress to give birth to you in this country, so you can't let them down. So the pressure comes from there too.
I think it's what you're saying about like falling like black, or the expectation for black people to fall short. I find that there's like a clear distinction there where it comes, they find them to fall short, like when we're talking about cerebral matters, like when we're talking about intelligence, where when we're talking about like physical matters, we then expect black people to dominate, right? But so for example, like you see on like footballers, I always think football is a great example, because no one will argue that black people can't play football or black people aren't great footballers, because there's just so many, you physically cannot argue that anymore. But the reason we associate black men with being great footballers is because of their pace, because of their strength, because of this. We don't associate it with them being like really technical minded and very well thought out and very deliberate. And so then what happens is then you kind of see that when these players try to like then transform into management, where management is seen as a much more cerebral job. Obviously, you don't need physical skills to be a manager. You need to be clever. Then these amazing black players, I'm talking top of like the 1% of the 1%, they don't make it. but these white players do, because it's like, oh, well, if you're white and you were good, it's probably because you probably weren't quick. So you had to be really clever to make it. But if you're black, you were just probably like really quick and like strong. And so that's what helped you get there, almost like a cheat code, right? And I've noticed that quite a few times. And yeah, it's a real pity, because it's ridiculous to expect, I think, people to be clever or stupid because of a certain country or continent that they come from. It's just, that's moronic. It's all about the education system that you've grown up in and nothing more than that, but not the level of melanin that you have in your skin. I mean, there's going to be really intelligent black people and really intelligent white people and really stupid black people and really stupid white people, because that's just a human thing. It's not a race thing. But I wonder, you were talking about like African culture. One of the great things that I think, well, one of the great things that black people have, they export their culture so well. And I think like white people love black culture. The question is, do they love black people? That's a different question. And maybe we could have a whole podcast dedicated to that. But I was wondering, do you think, for example, you were talking about WizKid and so on, but we don't even have to go that far. If we just look at the grime artists that everyone is gassing up right now, they all come from Caribbean or African descent, and they know that the actors, John Boyega, for example, Anthony Joshua, the boxer, all of these people are very proud of their Nigerian heritage. Could they potentially I don't want to put the blame on their feet, but is there a possibility that then maybe they could export their African culture better and kind of play up it more to bring it to like literally force it into the limelight and be like, because I don't know if it, like, maybe people don't know that Anthony Joshua is Nigerian. Maybe people don't know John Boyega is Nigerian. Do you know what I mean? And maybe like if they see these really successful people that they look up to as like, oh shit, that's what a Nigerian is. I didn't know like a Nigerian was the heavyweight champion of the world. Mad. Then if they see that, then the pity will start to go away a bit, because you're like, well, I'm not going to be pitying someone who could literally beat up anyone in the world. Do you know what I mean? Or John Boyega, like one of the best, maybe the new Denzel Washington of our era. Do you know what I mean? You're like, oh, mad, he's Nigerian. Is there a way that maybe we could celebrate, or they could celebrate their own heritage more, and therefore we who maybe aren't, people who maybe aren't as familiar, as conscious with that culture, actually start to appreciate it. So if they go onto the Graham Norton show or wherever, these mainstream platforms, to talk up about it and not be, do you know what I mean? And boom, yeah, I'm Nigerian, and the next fight I'm going to have is going to be in Lagos, and boom, do you know what I mean? And then you're going to start getting people in Lagos, where's that? And they're going to start like searching it up and stuff. I think like, do you think there's any credence to that?
Yeah, I agree. Like when you were talking, I was just remembering how just before I came to Skeg, I'd gone on a trip to Italy. And I think I told you about this, that I went to Naples, Sicily, Rome. And I had this perception of Italians being so hospitable, so nice, so kind. And meeting you and your dad amplified that for me. And so I had the mindset that this is what Italians are like. So when I went to France for my year abroad in 2015 and 2016, and I had an Italian lecturer, and he taught me about the history of Italy, he was like that too. And I'd already had a preconceived notion that he was going to be like that. And it's the same with what you're saying, in the sense that if people know that this person is from this country, then they're more likely to build a perception of what the people in that country are like. And I think if you are someone that's famous, if you are an influencer, naturally you're an ambassador to what whoever you are. For example, if you're an influencer and you're part of the LGBTQ community, LGBTQ plus, I think they call it now, community, you're seen as, an ambassador for that community, and people can look to you for advice or understanding of what that community is. Or like me, like I said, I'm not just Black, I'm a Black woman, but I'm from Nigeria. I'm also a Christian, So there's so many different things about you that people can look to. I remember even I learned a bit more about you talking about your dad being a Catholic, and your mum's a Catholic as well, I think, right? And you talking about Catholicism and learning about that. And, it was, I understood that through actually, just understanding a person first. And you're so right, because one thing I'd say, so using the examples you said, I know that a lot of people know that John Boyega is Nigerian because he's very vocal about his Nigerian heritage. At one point, just after he appeared in Star Wars, he came to Nigeria for Christmas in December and met up with other Nollywood actors. And I just thought that was so amazing. He's someone of heavy influence and he wants to show the world where he's from. And then during the Black Lives Matter movement, he was a very vocal lead in London, and he did a lot for that movement to educate people. So I really commend him for that. And I think the way he's going about it is so incredible and so amazing. But yeah, I think you're right about Anthony Joshua. Like maybe some people, maybe because of his name is English, people actually don't know that he's Nigerian unless you a really avid boxer, avid watcher of boxing. We know he's Nigerian because we're proud that a Nigerian is a heavyweight champion. Do you get what I mean? Is he a heavyweight champion? But yeah, we're proud that Nigerian is a heavyweight champion. Nigerians know he's Nigerian, but does the world know? And I think he can do more because I remember during the whole end SARS movement, people were nitpicking online about people that had spoken up and people that hadn't spoken up, and they were really disappointed at Anthony Joshua because he'd posted about Nigerian Independence Day. I think he'd shared some Nigerian food or something that he likes to eat. I think it was pounded jam, and but he'd never posted anything about the end SARS movement, and so people were upset. And also, I don't know if you know about the whole Beyonce incident. So obviously, people are not just upset with people that are from Nigeria being ambassadors of Nigeria, but they believe that if you've done something for Nigeria, if you're some way affiliated in Nigeria, you should also be a voice too. And so a lot of people were disappointed in Beyonce, which I think people shouldn't have focused too much on, what was celebrities doing. But some people were upset with Beyonce because obviously of her whole album that she recorded. And having Nigerian artists on the album such as Wizkid and who else did she have on the album? She had quite a few Nigerians on the album, and so people felt like she could have done more to support the cause. So it's more of a question of, if you are a person of influence, do you recognize the fact that you are an ambassador of that country by default? And do you take up that position rightfully? And if you do, why not? Because your people also have a voice. Even if you're from a country like, I don't know, Bermuda, I said that randomly, who don't have, I don't want to say they don't have any issues, but the world doesn't hear about their issues. Are you proudly a Bermudian, I think they're called? I don't know how to say their nationality, but do you know what I mean? Are you a proud Jamaican? Are you a proud Mexican? Are you a proud Italian? Are you proud? Even if you're from I met someone on my year abroad and he was from Afghanistan, and he was so proud of being from Afghanistan, and he wanted to tell everyone about the wrong world perception of Afghanistan and Iraq. And I just thought that was so inspiring, him noticing that even though he lived in Zurich in Switzerland most of his life, he knows that he needs to educate people about his nationality. So it all goes into patriotism and nationalism and stuff like that. But yeah, I think you're right that celebrities and influencers can do more to kind of use their influence in a good way.
Yeah, it's an interesting one because I asked the question. I don't know how much I believe in the question itself, because, for example, when the whole BLM movement came up, you know how you were saying people may be disappointed in Anthony Joshua for the end SARS. There's a lot of people who were disappointed in J. Cole because J. Cole didn't really speak up about it. And then he sent out a tweet and he just basically said, like, guys, I'm not, like, I understand I'm a black kind of influential guy here, but I'm not the one you should be listening to on this topic. Like, and then he like tweeted like a few accounts and a few people who, like, if you're interested, go listen to these people because they can talk about it better. And it's like, I do think we get in this in the world that we live in today, this whole thing of influence. I mean, I almost hate that word now, but this whole thing of influencer, like ultimately it's a weird one. Can Anthony Joshua do more? Maybe, who knows? My question is, does he have to do more? Like, he's a boxer. You know what I'm saying? It's like we shouldn't be looking to a boxer to teach us about problems that are going on in Nigeria. If he takes it on himself and on his own shoulders, that's a great thing. Do you know what I mean? Like you're saying with John Boyega, that's a brilliant thing. But like, I don't think that we should just. It's a hard one because I think now we look at someone's followers and we go, "Oh my God, you have 2 million followers, bruv. You should be doing everything. You should be doing a madness right now because it's not right that you blah blah blah." Like, oh, what? So you're happy to take these 2 million followers' money, yeah? But now that like your country needs you, you're not going to be talking. It's like, but he's a singer, or he's a boxer, or he's a rapper, or he's a runner. Like, they are amazing in what they do, but I don't want to be listening to like, and I love Anthony Joshua, but like, I don't necessarily want to be listening to Anthony Joshua about like politics. Do you get me? Like, I want to be listening to like whoever our closest Nelson Mandela is these days. I want to be listening to that guy. And I'll listen to Anthony Joshua when it's about boxing, you get me? And I think that's a difficult one because I think we get sometimes twisted in it and we kind of expect our heroes to then talk about everything. And I also feel they have a responsibility if they're going to talk like John Boyega or whoever it may be. If they're going to talk because they have such a platform, they have to be knowledgeable about it. Because if they say something wrong or something that actually isn't correct or whatever the case may be, you're now going to get a load of people who now have that same opinion because I think we've lost autonomy of thought and we just allow people to think for ourselves, right? And we just go, oh, well, Anthony Joshua said this thing, so it must be true because Anthony Joshua said it and he has 15 million followers. And it's like, well, maybe, but maybe we should also do our own little research, you know? And it's a difficult one, but I asked the question just because I think there's so, like, I obviously know living with you guys, how many Nigerians there are. And you talk about the massive population, but there's a huge population of Nigerians in England as well. And a lot of them are really, really successful people. Maybe sometimes we don't even realize. And we, they're British. And it's great. Like yes, Anthony Joshua is British to me, but he also has that Nigerian heritage that I'm happy, like I'm proud that he has that. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like it speaks well about Nigeria ultimately. Like you said, he's the heavyweight champion of the world. I mean, that is something to be proud of. That's why he's loved in England, let's be fair. But I wondered, you gave me, I want to kind of like finish up here because I know, and I'm sure we'll have you on again, and there's so many like just different tangents that we can go on and, get lost down rabbit holes. But for people who are listening to this and then they now go, you know what, this is maybe I don't pay enough attention to Africa, or I haven't paid enough attention to the history of Africa, and I want to know a bit more. Are there any resources? I know you kind of recommended a Netflix series to me. Are there any resources like that? Maybe some books, maybe, I don't know, some other podcasts or people that they should just follow on Twitter who kind of regularly talk about these topics, that someone can like just follow these people or listen to this or watch this, and then they'll start to find out more autonomously.
Yeah, oh my gosh, I'd love to be back on the show. Honestly, I've really enjoyed this, and thank you so much for the opportunity. And I really love how you did say that people have their specific fields. Like, you're right, Anthony Joshua is a boxer, and there shouldn't be pressure on him to share his political views. Really and truly, people watch him for boxing. And you're so right. And you know what? You're right about also the autonomous, the fact that people are not autonomous in their thinking, and so they do look to people they look up to and influencers to make decisions for themselves. Like, oh, Anthony Joshua was talking about SARS, right? Okay, I believe in SARS. Do you know what I mean? And by the way, SARS was the hashtag for anybody listening. But you're so right about that, and it's really made me think. About who I look to really for influence. So thank you so much. But yeah, there's so many things to be done. And I think there's pressure in telling people, do this. because it doesn't come naturally to them. And that's what I was saying at the beginning, like, don't just post, especially if it doesn't come naturally to you. Like you were saying, some people might just have 200 followers. What's that going to do? Some people might just have 20. It's just a family account. Whatever comes natural to you, you should do. So some people I know, especially after Black Lives Matter movement, love reading and love reading novels. So they decided to just read novels by people they don't normally read novels by. And, you know, there's so many amazing African books and novels, specifically Nigerian books. I can recommend books like Half of a Yellow Sun, Americana, Stay With Me, The Thing Around Your Neck. Amazing books. And literally, I just think that there's so many things that can be done. Yes, watching a documentary on Netflix, or not even a documentary on Netflix, a movie on Netflix. Many people learn through watching movies. So you can watch a movie, and I'm so sorry, I'm sure you'll find me saying this, Seb, but we can see each other, and Seb just showed me that he has Americana. Have you read it yet?
Not just yet. It's on. Basically, I do like a book club with my friend, and so each month we choose like a book each, and then like we read those. And so I was just thinking when you said Americana, I was like, I've got that. So yeah, this is on the. I'm reading it over Christmas. Actually, it's on the Christmas reading list. So
you're gonna love it. You're gonna love it. It's so good. Please tell me what you think when you finish it, because I'm currently reading it now, and a lot.
Okay.
I've read her books. Yeah, I've read her books before. I've read Purple Hibiscus, and it's amazing. Half of the Yellow Sun actually has a film, and Half of the Yellow Sun is about the Nigerian Civil War. So a lot of novelists actually use experiences to write. So if you're someone that likes to read, you can read African books. You can read about the African experience. I've got a few on my phone that I can recommend that are not necessarily about Africa, but just about the Black experience. You know, there's so many things, for example, like the author Mallory Blackman, she's written about things, I don't know if people realize, but Noughts and Crosses is basically about the Black experience, but if it was the other way around. There's this book that I downloaded recently called, I can't find it, but basically it's about the Black experience, and it's just so amazing. There's this one, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race. That's a really informative book about race. And like Seb said, there's a documentary. So there's a documentary on Netflix called The Making of an African Colony, and it talks about how Nigeria was made, basically, and how the borders were carved out to make the country. There's a few there's a lot of films on Nigeria that will just show you about African life. You know, will change your mind about perceptions and how a lot of Africans are living quite well, and how Africans are going through a lot of things like human trafficking. There's an amazing film on Netflix about human trafficking in Nigeria called Olete, and it's I couldn't watch it in one day. I had to watch it in two because it really broke my heart. And it's about human trafficking in Nigeria and prostitution. There's a film that just came out on Netflix called Citation, and that's about African lecturers exploiting African students, namely male lecturers exploiting young African students and making them offer sex for grades. Which, you know, is based on a true story, but it's an amazing film. And so these things can educate you. You know, it's not that we're telling you to go to the library or go and read, you know, academic journals. We just want people to be more educated about Africa and about the Black experience, and whichever way suits you. None of these things you may hate watching films and reading books, but I'm sure you know somebody that is of a different race to you. It doesn't even have to be African, of a different ethnic minority. Why not find out about their culture by talking to them? Because if Seb had met us and decided not to talk to us, he would have never known about our culture, and I would have never known about Seb's culture. I learned so much about Italy. I learned how, because I used to think like, when I went to Italy, how come there's food everywhere? But I realized that food is part of Italian culture. Like Italians bond over food. And I just think that that's so amazing and so beautiful because I'm a massive foodie. So you just learn so much by talking to people, by interacting with people, and by just maybe following people online that you wouldn't normally follow. So yeah, I'm so happy and so impressed at the efforts that people have made recently to really understand African culture and the Black experience, especially in the UK, and the sort of compassion that's been going around in the world. I think if 2020 has been 1 year of something, it's been a year of compassion. Like people have actually sat up and like realized that, wow, this life is not just about me. People are going through serious issues in the world. Not only are we in the middle of a pandemic, but people are, go through issues on a daily basis and have been going through years. Imagine if it all never happened. So I'm really happy with everything that's been going on, and I'm so excited. Like, you know me, I'm such an optimistic person in the sense that I feel like all of this is actually for the good. Like, yeah, it might seem like the world is coming to an end, but I think it's just starting. Like, people are starting to be compassionate. People are starting to be loving, considerate of other people. And if it wasn't for, yes, obviously lives have been lost, which is so sad, of COVID and other situations, and people have lost their jobs and everything, people have actually slowed down to think about more than themselves and more than their own immediate families. And people like Africans are getting noticed. And I think if there wasn't a lockdown or COVID and this whole SARS thing happened, I don't think the noise would have been so loud. But because people have been at home and online, they've gotten to know and they've gotten to support us. So I personally, as a British-Nigerian, want to thank everybody, especially you, Seb. Like, when I say that people do things that feel comfortable to them, you've done it in the sense that you messaged me and the first thing you said is, if there's anything we can do, let me know. I'd love to have you on the podcast, because that's your way of helping. You don't necessarily have to like post infographics, post lots of stuff online, because your podcast can reach so many people that like to listen to podcasts. So it's what naturally comes to you. You can learn through so many podcasts about Africa, about Black people, and watching videos on YouTube. There's so many resources. So I would just say, do what suits you. I don't want to force anybody to do anything. Doesn't feel right, because when it doesn't feel right, it's not coming from a place of love. So yeah.
A really good one, which I know is going to be hard for people who are listening now, and especially in the UK where there's a current lockdown going on. But when that's over, especially if you live in like a multicultural city like London, I mean, I've always thought, this is why Brexit hurt me so much, but I always thought England's strength was its diversity, and maybe the lack of the English culture, or the dilution of the English culture, is actually its own strength. And one of the great things you can do if you live in London, or you live in one of these really, Birmingham, Manchester, wherever, is like choose, like on a month, like if you have a girlfriend, or you're with your boys or whatever, or with your girlfriends, if you're a girl listening, whatever, choose like, and let's say, look, every month, yeah, or like if we're going to go out for every week for dinner, like just to meet up with each other, like why don't, instead of we always go to the same place and we're always getting the same like burger and chips, like, look, I live in London, like there's so many places, like why don't we actually go this one time to like a Nigerian spot? Why don't we go to a Ghanaian spot? Why don't we go to a Jamaican spot? Why don't we go to a blah 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 spot? And I know, like, I get it, sometimes it feels really uncomfortable, like trust me, as a white person who's done my best since like 10 years old to like really throw myself into like Black culture, sometimes it is weird, and sometimes you do feel like you stick out like a sore thumb. Like I remember when Michael took me to his church, there's 2,000 Nigerians dancing in a
Oh my God.
church. I am the only white person there. You can't get more uncomfortable than that, okay? But like
Yeah.
when you put yourself in those situations, and I know people are thinking, oh yeah, but I don't want to just go to like a Nigerian place or whatever, Jamaican restaurant, and it's all gonna be like Jamaican English, and I'm gonna go there and I don't even know what to order, and I'm so out of my comfort zone. But like, trust me, like if you go there and you talk to the restaurateur and you're like, hi, like I don't really know much about like Nigerian food, like what is jollof rice, what is pounded jam, what is this egusi soup, and like blah blah. I'm guarantee you that restaurateur will like pour in just like pure
Yeah.
enthusiasm, and they'll explain it all to you, and they'll say, oh, what food do you like? Do you like spicy food? Do you like heavy food? Do you like what's your type of, and then they'll recommend, and then from there you can talk to them, oh well, like, well, why is this from that, and what ingredient, and then you like strike up a little conversation, and then like instead of having your boring Nando's that you have every single day, that all you're helping is this multinational, you're helping a little family run restaurant, and you're learning about a culture in like a really great, like fun way. Like who doesn't love food? Do you know what I mean? That's a great way to do it. And I feel like sometimes we feel like it has to be books and like films, you know what I mean? Because it's like that's very obvious, right? It's like, oh, I'm reading, I must be learning. But like you can learn through eating, or like you can learn through like going to the theatre. Do you know what I mean? Like stop going to Wicked. How many times have you seen Wicked on the West End? Do you know the plot now? That's it. Leave Wicked till next year. Find like somewhere that's more like local to you, and like find, do you know what I mean? Or like, and all of these things, and then like you'll get to learn. And I think we get so caught up as well, you know, in identity. And I think it's like, I always talk about with Jim like this, and it's something we always talk about. I think like maybe 8 out of 10 of our conversations somehow are revolved to identity. Because I'm a strong believer that like you have to have an identity, because I think it's something that gives you confidence. But I also think like if you believe too much in your identity, it can hold you back. And I feel like sometimes we feel like, oh, I'm white, I can't go to like, Clapham Comedy Centre because that's going to be filled with black people, black comedy, and I'm not going to get it. But it's like, well, just go there. And if you don't find it funny, well, fuck it. You've had a couple of beers, you leave. It's no big deal. Do you know what I mean? But like, but then you might go there and you might find the new Mo Gilligan, and boom, there. Now and then you're gonna be like, oh my god, like they're gonna be like, who's this white guy here? And then after a while, if you keep on going, they're just gonna accept you. I basically forced myself on you guys. Do you know what I mean? Like it wasn't, but that's just how it is, because I was just interested. I was like, well, this is something I've never seen before. They're talking about things I've never heard before. They dance in a way I've never seen before. Like, what is this stuff? And then do you know what I mean? And it's like, I think sometimes we think of it like, I don't belong. Like, oh, that's a Nigerian gaff, that's a Jamaican gaff, this is an English place, and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, if we were just more like, you know what, let's just share it. Like, it doesn't matter that you're white, eat some jollof rice. And it doesn't matter if you eat it wrong or whatever. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, you're just trying. Who cares? Like, and just don't take yourself too seriously with it. Then you can, like, it's beautiful to learn about cultures that way. Do you know what I mean? And
I agree.
Yeah,
honestly, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, man. I listen, put it this way. Bless him, Michael, right? This is quite funny. So we're recording right now. I think today is it the 13th, I believe? I told Michael I was coming 13th of November. I told Michael I was coming to London on the 12th of December. He, for some reason, read it wrong, and he thought I said the 12th of November. So then he texts me at like 4 p.m. and he goes, bro, like, how's your flight? He sends me his, like, because I was gonna stay at his house, right? He sends me like his address, blah blah blah, and I'm like, bro, like, I'm not coming for another month. And he's like, nah. And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, I got the towels ready, I've been cleaning the house for a whole day. I bought in food. And I was like, bro, it's not that serious. Like, all I need is a sofa, it's fine. But like, it's funny because it, bless him, but what I'm really looking forward to, I was like, Michael, you know, when I come back, I need you to take me to like some Nigerian joints, because I haven't had like proper jollof rice for a good minute now, and I need some. And like, I'm looking forward to that experience. Do you know what I mean? And like, maybe you don't have the confidence to go in, like you and your 3 blonde mates, to a Nigerian restaurant. Okay, fair enough. But I'm, like you said, I'm sure you know someone who's Nigerian. I'm sure you go to a work with someone or whatever, and you could just say to them, hey, like, I've seen there's this new Nigerian spot open up in Brixton. Would you fancy going with me like one night after work? I guarantee you that person would be like, oh shit, this person's actually paying attention to my culture. They're not going to be like, nah, you're white, you're not allowed type thing. It doesn't work that way. Like you said, Africans are mad hospitable. And I just feel like if we took that initiative, then like honestly it's Pandora's box once you get in there, because there's so much to every culture. I mean, I love learning about culture. It's my thing. I get off on it. But like I just feel like if people there's all I'm trying to say is that there's different ways of doing it, like it can be books and films are great and maybe they're the most obvious, but you've got the music, you've got the food, you've got the theater, like there's all different ways. The comedy, do you know what I mean? Like if you go to an Irish comedy night and you go to a black British comedy night, there's two very different forms of comedy there.
Different, yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? You're going to learn from that one way or the other. You'll be like, oh fuck, like this is how they see the world, like this is their perspective. Do you get me? And it's an interesting way of doing things, man. I think there's so many different ways to get into it, but listen, that's a conversation maybe for another time. But
definitely, honestly,
yeah, I just want to thank you for coming on, Chris. I know we've been trying for a while now. There's been bad internet. There's been your dad watching the TV in the background. There's been what's going on, but we've managed to persevere and we've finally got a podcast out there. And I'm really happy that we did that. And look, I'll put all of the links. If anyone wants to follow Christina or listen to the podcast or anything like that, we'll put all the links in the show notes for sure. But yeah, until next time, Chris, just thank you. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Well, Seb can see my face. I wish like sometimes in podcasts people can see your face, but Seb can see how massive grin I have, because it's so nice to know that I was part of your cultural journey of loving different cultures. And even you too, like I think you made me so much more interested in learning, especially about European cultures, that when I was able to go to France for a year abroad and I had Italian friends and I had Spanish friends, they reminded me so much of you because you had already taught me so much about that. So I totally understand with the cultures. But by the way, if Michael is taking you to a Nigerian place, tell him there's actually a place near where he lives called 805. If it's not 805, there's another place called Enish as well. There's another place in Lewisham called Enish. I feel like I'm plugging businesses, and this is not sponsored by the way, but they have authentic, like Nigerian food, like the Nigerian jollof rice should taste a bit smoky, like it's burnt at the bottom a little bit, and that's when you know that you've got the good rice. So just tell Michael to take you to those two places, and I really hope you have a great trip. And honestly, I feel like it's such a privilege to be on your show. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to be back. Honestly, can't wait to be back.
Not at all. Michael, if you're listening to this and you take me to any whack Nigerian places, now I've been told by two people, Christina and Umar, who's coming out next year from Dope Black Dads. He also says 805. So Michael has pressure now, If he's taking me to some dub place, I'll be having words with him. But yeah, I really appreciate it, and I can't wait for you to have you back on the podcast next year at some point.
Thank you so much, Seb. Thanks, guys, for listening.
Hi, guys. Thank you for listening to the podcast. Please don't forget to subscribe and leave a 5-star review if you haven't already. Every review helps us climb the podcast charts so that even more of you can listen to our amazing guests. We really appreciate the support. Remember to tune in next week. But until then, keep safe and have a good one.